The reason I've gone back to the 22nd of April simply is because that was the budget in which Alistair Darling introduced a load of the stuff we've got now. And let us not forget that. And what did he introduce in that budget? He introduced the 50% rate of tax. That's what we've got now. He introduced the notion that if you've got income of more than £100,000, you don't get a personal allowance. That's what we've got now. He introduced the new pension rules. And when I say new pension rules, I should say the old new pension rules. Because the new pension rules from the 22nd of April 2009 are old hat. They introduced new rules which never became rules. That's how old hat they were, but he introduced that. He introduced the national insurance contributions rises. But again, in cunning old Labour way, or was it old new Labour way? I don't know. They were rolled out in the future. So we haven't got them yet. Those changes we haven't yet got. We're about to get them. The 6th of April 2011, national insurance is going up. Where's it going up from? Not from yesterday's budget, not from the emergency budget in June 2010, not even from Alistair Darling's pre-budget report in December 2009. It's going up from April 2009. So that's where we are now. Pre-budget report, what happened then? Not much, really. Not much. He accelerated the national insurance changes, though. So they're coming in one hit on the 5th of April 2011. It was going to be half and half, 11th and 12th. He also talked a lot about bankers' bonuses. The bankers were the evil people at that time. And what else? Nothing really. He meddled with the pension rules. The new pension rules got changed almost immediately. What happened then? We had a budget. This was Alistair Darling's last budget. What did he do? Pilloried the bankers, but meddled with entrepreneur relief. That was the only thing he did, really. He doubled the entrepreneur relief limit. Paul Hughes will be telling you huge amounts about entrepreneur relief. I'm not going to say any more. We then had a Finance Act. We then had a general election. And, of course, the political landscape changed. And then we had the coalition government. They then issued their document, which I've been talking about ever since. This fat document, the coalition's document for government, and what their fiscal approach was going to be. And they told us various things. They told us that basically they don't like inheritance tax mitigation. So inheritance tax was frozen. They do like raising personal allowances for the lower paid. So they upped it by £1,000, but that hasn't come into effect yet. They didn't like capital gains tax, or the way it was being used and abused, they thought. So they meddled with capital gains tax. Basically, they don't like tax avoidance. That was a Lib Dems policy all the way through. Every time you heard a Lib Dem, Johnny, on the radio, it was always bang on about tax avoidance. So they didn't like that. So then we got the emergency budget, which put us to where we are now. But it didn't meddle with any of these fundamentals. Other than, in that emergency budget, it was heralded that corporation tax was coming down. That was the point. We were tipped off that corporation tax was coming down. And as you will have realised yesterday, we have more news in that regard. And that, please bear this absolutely clearly in your minds, that there is a massive difference between corporation tax rates, which are low and going lower in ways that I will explain, and income tax and national insurance rates, which are high, and whether they are going higher. They are going higher because national insurance itself is going up by 1% from the 6th of April, but they are going higher. He mentioned yesterday, en passant, that the 50% rate of tax might be reviewed. It should be regarded as sort of temporary. Well, we'll believe it when we see it, won't we? We don't trust politicians in that regard. Since then, what's happened? Huge amounts of consultation on all sorts of things. One thing in particular, which Paul will be picking up on, pensions. I know there's people in the room to whom pensions are close, or for whom pensions are close to their hearts, and they will be aware that part of this consultation ended up with the legislation that was introduced on the 22nd of April 2009 being ditched before it even got enacted. So lots of stuff. Lots of legislation about tax avoidance. Most of the people in the room who have had much dealings with me will know that on the 9th of December 2010, certain rules are introduced to legislate against what I call remuneration trusts. So all that's happened. So that's the background. That's just background. So what I'm going to do now is, at a right old lick, race through some points. So where are we now? VAT rate, 20%. Well, we know that. That was from the 4th of January, and that was from the emergency budget. Income tax rates, I've told you already, up to 50%. Really, it's not 50%. I can do all sorts of calculations to demonstrate how the 50% rate is illusory in certain examples, depending on whether you're getting dividend income, depending on whether you're losing your personal allowance. Over £100,000, there are marginal rates are actually more than that, but let's just take it as read that the headline rate is 50%. Personal allowance. We've been cheated out of them, as I said, if your income's more than £100,000. So all this talk about increasing the personal allowance, it's all very interesting, isn't it? If your income is less than £100,000, so you actually get it. But if it's more than that, you don't get it anyway. So it's completely irrelevant to you. The change that is coming into effect on the 6th of April 11, which increases the personal allowance from 6,475 to 7,475, which was announced in the emergency budget, that £1,000 increase, if you are a 40% taxpayer, you do not benefit from it. Because at the same time they increase that, they whittle down the level at which you pay 40% tax. And if you are in that rather awkward position, you're worse off. Because 40% of 1,000 would make you better off by 400 quid. But the extra higher rate on the shrinking in the higher rate thresholds makes you worse off by 480 quid. So you're actually worse off. Even though you're getting it, you're worse off. It's astonishing. NIC rates, well, I've said that, going up by 1%. Corporation tax. They are coming down, and I've got a slide which explains it a bit more in a moment. Capital gains tax, no change. If you're in the capital gains tax era, you pay tax at 28% if you're a higher rate taxpayer, 18% if you're a basic rate taxpayer, or 10% if you get this lovely thing called entrepreneur relief, about which Paul is going to tell you.